The galaxy had a pecking order. It always had, apparently, since the first sentient being crawled out of whatever primordial soup their planet offered and decided to look up at the stars, and at the top of that pecking order, the predators, of course. Because nothing says I deserve to be in charge quite like evolutionary adaptations specifically designed to eat other things. The Draconians, with their impressive jaw strength and retractable claws, headed the Galactic Alliance Council, the Varaxians. With venom sacs capable of paralyzing creatures 10 times their size, controlled most of the mining operations across 3 spiral arms. The Kashyyyk, whose ancestors had hunted in packs, much like Earth's wolves, had the market cornered on military technology. That made interstellar war both efficient and extremely profitable. It was just the way of things. The universe's most cosmic joke: build a civilization advanced enough to travel between stars, and you still can't escape the food chain. Then humans showed up. They didn't exactly make a grand entrance. No flashy warp signatures or conquest fleets. A solitary ship running what the more established species considered outdated propulsion tech, quietly approached the outpost orbiting Proxima Centauri with a message: "Hello, we come in peace. Would you like to trade?" How quaint the diplomatic division of the Galactic Alliance, staffed almost exclusively by various herbivore species who evolved to be polite rather than confrontational, found humans charming in their naivety. Small, soft beings with blunt teeth and no claws to speak of. Their planet was apparently a Class 4 death world by galactic standards, but the Council chalked that up to mere coincidence. After all, how dangerous could a species be when they greeted the cosmos with handshakes instead of displays of dominance? "You have to see these creatures," Counselor Thrax, a 9-foot-tall Draconian with scales that shimmered between crimson and gold, told his colleagues over expensive Arcturan brandy. "They're like those, what are they called, those pets the Signan aristocracy keeps round faces always looking alarmed." Tribbles offered Vexnar, a slender Varaxian, whose venom was rumored to be potent enough to dissolve Durastyle. No, the jumpy ones with the twitchy noses. Gypnorphs, yes, exactly like bipedal Gaporves, with delusions of grandeur. How wrong they were. How catastrophically, hilariously wrong the first 5 years of human integration into galactic society. Went smoothly enough they established trade routes, set up embassies, and even joined a few minor committees, usually ones focused on art preservation or waste management. The predator species found their earnestness amusing. The way one might find a child's crayon drawing adorable without considering it a masterpiece. The first hint that something wasn't quite as it seemed came during a routine. Border Patrol near human space, a Kreesic scout ship detected an anomaly, a small outpost on an asteroid that wasn't listed in any official registry when questioned. The human ambassador squirmed a bit and explained it was just a research station and apologized for the clerical oversight. The kick captain, whose ancestors had developed an instinct for when prey was hiding something, decided to investigate further. What they found changed everything. Weaponry, not the standard defensive arrays most species maintained, but weapons specifically designed for offensive measures, the kind of implements that suggested humans weren't just interested in peaceful coexistence, but they're so small, the captain reportedly said to his first officer, "What could they possibly do with all this?" The answer came 3 months later, when a Varaxian mining operation accidentally expanded into territory humans had claimed. The diplomatic channels buzzed with human protests, which the Varaxian ambassador summarily dismissed. After all, what were these soft pink creatures going to do? Write a strongly worded letter. Then came the transmission that would eventually enter galactic law. Since diplomatic measures have failed, we are dispatching the Marines, the Varaxian. Commander on site, one Civtax. By name, allegedly laughed so hard at this announcement that he dislodged one of his venom sacs and had to receive medical attention. What are they sending their version of a security? Team, should I prepare refreshments? The response from his bridge officer was prophetic in its simplicity. "Sir, I've been studying their transmissions. I don't think these Marines are what we think they are within 48 standard hours. The mining operation was under human control, not a single shot had been fired. Not one casualty reported. The Varaxian personnel were all accounted for, though most refused to speak about what happened. The few who did described beings moving with precision that defied their seemingly fragile physiology humans, using strategies that somehow anticipated every Varaxian countermove, and most disturbing of all, they smiled while doing it. It's like they enjoyed it. Own engineer later testified before the council. Not the violence. There wasn't any they enjoyed. The challenge. The hunt, the word hunt, sent a visible shudder through the council chambers. Predators recognized predators after all. When questioned about the incident, the human ambassador, a deceptively unimposing figure with graying hair, simply shrugged. You encountered our Marines. They're trained to resolve situations efficiently. But what are they? Demanded Thrax. Some kind of elite military unit? The ambassador's smile didn't reach his eyes. Oh, they're just own branch of our armed forces. Nothing special, really. Standard training, standard procedures, if that was standard. The Galactic Alliance realized they might have drastically misunderstood humanity's place in the cosmic hierarchy. Rumors began to circulate. Theories were floated about human evolution, about the kind of environmental pressures that could produce a species that looked like prey, but thought like predators. Some scientists hypothesized that humans were actually apex predators who had evolved to appear non-threatening, the ultimate evolutionary trap. The public record from this period shows a marked increase in research grants for studies on human biology, psychology, and history. The results only deepened the mystery. Humans, it seemed, had spent most of their history fighting each other. They had perfected the art of war against their own kind, which made them uniquely dangerous when facing other species. They had no natural weaponry because they had invented artificial ones millennia ago, and these Marines, they were just one small component of humanity's military capacity, not even their elite forces. If human data was to be believed a confidential, memos circulated among the highest echelons of predator government simply stated, "We may have invited wolves into the galactic living room and mistaken them for sheep." The stage was set for the incident that would permanently sear the word Marines into the collective neurological response system of every predator species in the galaxy. The collective minds of the galactic predator species should have taken the Varaxian mining incident as a warning, a bright flashing neon sign that read danger approach with extreme caution, but if predator species were good at anything besides the obvious evolutionary advantages, it was pride, and pride, as countless philosophers across the cosmos have noted, makes for terrible decision-making. Case in point, the Draconian High Command's brilliant plan to put humans in their place by seizing control of Outpost Kappa 9, a research facility orbiting a gas giant in a contested system. The operation was led by Commander Grethar, a decorated veteran whose collection of battle trophies required its own anti-grav storage unit. These humans responded to the Varaxian incursion with restraint because they fear escalation. Greth explained to his officers while sharpening his already deadly claws, "We will show them what happens when they face a truly superior predator species." One of his junior officers, fresh from the academy and still possessing that rarest of traits among Draconians, common sense, dared toast, "But sir, shouldn't we be concerned about these Marines they might send?" The room fell silent. The commander's scales shifted from their normal proud crimson to a dangerous burgundy. "You've been watching too many human entertainment feeds," Grethar growled. "Next, you'll be telling me you believe in their boogeyman?" "No, sir, but the Varaxian reports the Varaxians got spooked by a bunch of soft-skinned bipeds who probably just surprised them. Our ancestors hunted prey across burning plains while theirs were still figuring out which end of a stick was pointy, and that, as they say in human vernacular ways, that the assault on Outpost Kappa 9 was executed with typical Draconian flair, which is to say, maximum force. Applied with minimum subtlety, the station's defenses were overwhelmed in under an hour. The skeleton crew of 37 human scientists and technicians surrendered. Without firing a shot, Brex was so disappointed by the lack of resistance that he almost felt bad about the whole thing almost. "Is this truly the best your species has to offer?" he asked the station's administrator, a small human female with silver-streaked hair and surprisingly steady hands, as she was marched onto the command deck. "We're a research outpost," she replied with infuriating calmness, dedicated to studying atmospheric composition of gas giants. "What did you expect a warship I expected your species to have learned to?" "Protect what is yours," Grexar said, spreading his impressive wings in the traditional Draconian display of dominance. The administrator glanced at her colleagues, then back at the imposing figure before her. "I've already sent a distress call. You might want to leave before they arrive." They, Lamry, one word. One of Grethar's secondary eyelids flickered in what humans might interpret as a blink yes, and here witnesses would later recall the human's lips curved upward in what was technically a smile, but conveyed none of the warmth typically associated with the expression the Marine's Grestar's laugh echoed through the command center, a sound like boulders tumbling down a mountainside let them. "Come, I look forward to testing myself against these legendary warriors of yours." The administrator shrugged a very human gesture that the universal translators struggled to interpret. "It's your funeral. For 72 standard hours. Nothing happened. The Draconian forces fortified the station, set up defensive perimeters, and waited some of the younger officers. Began to wonder if the humans had abandoned the outpost and its personnel commander, Grexthar, however, knew better. This was a psychological tactic, he decided. Make your enemy wait. Let anxiety build erode their confidence. A primitive approach, he informed his officers during their third briefing, but somewhat effective on lesser minds. On the fourth day, the sensors detected a single ship approaching. Not the fleet. They had prepared for just one vessel smaller than a standard cruiser, broadcasting no identification codes. They sent one ship. Grexthar's secondary eyelids blinked rapidly in confusion. "Scan it. What kind of weaponry are we dealing with?" The sensor officer, whose scales had taken on a slightly ashen, Hugh looked up from his console, "Sir. The scans show minimal armaments. It appears to be a transport vessel, a transport." The commander's tail lashed against the deck, leaving a small dent. "They are sending supplies during a hostage situation." The communication officer interrupted, voice pitched, higher than was dignified for a Draconian warrior. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human vessel. Put it through. Let's hear what pathetic demands they're making." The voice that filled the command center was calm, measured, almost conversational. "This is Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez of the United Earth Marine Corps. You are currently occupying a human research facility and holding human personnel. Against their will, you have 15 minutes to evacuate your forces and release all hostages unharmed." Gregar's scales rippled with amusement, "And if we refuse, then we'll come in and get them." The commander's jaw dropped slightly, revealing rows of serrated teeth. "You're threatening to assault this station with what army our scans show your vessel carries. Fewer than 50 life forms, we're Marines, sir." The human's voice somehow conveyed both extreme politeness and lethal intent. "We don't need an army." The communication ended. Grexar turned to his second-in-command, mandibles twitching. With incredulity, "They can't possibly think 40-ohm individuals can retake this station from 200 Draconian elites." His second, whose family lineage included ant stores, who had survived 3 extinction-level events on the Draconian homeworld, looked distinctly uncomfortable. "Sir, what if these are the same Marines who dealt with the Varaxians? Then we'll have the honor of showing the galaxy how Draconians handle them." Grexar roared, slamming a clawed fist against the command console. Battle stations prepare for boarding action. Precisely 14 minutes and 30 seconds later, the station's external sensors detected multiple small objects launching from the human vessel, not missiles or torpedoes as expected, but humans in armored suits, propelling themselves directly toward the station's multiple access points. They're using themselves as projectiles. The weapons officer's voice cracked with disbelief. That's insane. What followed would later be described in a classified Draconian military report as a systematic dismantling of superior forces through methods that defy conventional tactical analysis. The Marines entered through 19 different access points simultaneously. They moved in patterns that seemed random, but somehow always put them at an advantage. They used the station's own systems against the occupiers' venting atmosphere from sections containing Draconian forces while leaving adjacent areas untouched, overriding gravity controls, topping enemies to walls or ceilings, reprogramming maintenance drones. To create distractions, most disturbing of all, according to survivors, was their communication. While Draconian forces shouted orders and status updates, the Marines operated in near silence, communicating through subtle hand gestures and what appeared to be prearranged tactical patterns like a hunting pack that had rehearsed their strategy countless times 3 hours after. The first Marine set foot on the station, Commander Grexthar found himself cornered in the Central Research Lab, surrounded by 5 humans whose armor bore the scars of battle, but who themselves showed no signs of fatigue. How? He demanded. Wings pressed flat against his back in an instinctive posture of submission his pride would never let him acknowledge. How did you overcome our superior strength, our natural weapons? The Marine who stepped forward, presumably their leader, removed her helmet, revealing features that would be considered unremarkable among humans. "You're thinking about this all wrong," she said, checking something on her wrist display with casual indifference to the deadly predator before her. It was never about physical advantages. Then what? Grexar's voice had lost its commanding resonance. The Marine looked up, and her expression made the commander's ancestral hindbrain fire warning signals she hadn't experienced since hatchling nightmares. It wasn't anger or hatred. In her eyes, it was something far worse. Professional assessment humans didn't evolve to be the strongest or fastest. She explained, as if to a particularly slow student, "We evolve," another Marine chimed in. "Plus, we spent thousands of years perfecting the art of killing. Each that makes fighting other species pretty straightforward by comparison. But you're not even predators." Grexar protested claws, scraping helplessly against the lab floor. The first Marine tilted her head. "Aren't we, though? Our ancestors chased prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We didn't need speed or strength when we had stamina and planning." She gestured to her team in Marines where what happens when humans decide to distill those traits into their purest form as Grexthar was led away in restraints specifically designed to neutralize Draconian physiological advantages. Restraints the humans had somehow prepared in advance, he realized, with dawning horror that the galaxy had fundamentally misunderstood humanity's place in the cosmic order. They weren't prey masquerading as predators. They were a type of predator the galaxy had never encountered before, one that hunted, using its mind first and its body, second one that had turned warfare into a science and then taught that science to specialists called Marines. Word of the Capane incident spread through secure channels then, through not-so-secure channels, and finally through the galactic equivalent of social media. The details grew with each retelling, but the core remained the same. 43 human Marine Shad systematically defeated 200 Draconian elite warriors, suffered minimal casualties, and rescued all hostages, and they had done it with a frightening efficiency that suggested they could have been far less merciful if they'd chosen to be in the detention center where the Draconian survivors awaited diplomatic negotiations. For their release, a young medical officer noticed something unprecedented. The mighty warriors flinched, actually, physically recoiled whenever they heard the human guards use the word Marine. A neurological response had been born. News travels fast. In an age of faster-than-light communication, news of spectacular military defeats travels even faster, especially when it involves the mighty Draconians getting their scales handed to them by a species previously categorized somewhere between mostly harmless and probable future appetizer within a standard galactic week. The Kappa-9 incident had become the subject of emergency sessions in every predator species. High Command classified, reports were drafted, experts were consulted, and more than a few military careers ended abruptly with the equivalent of early retirement or reassignment to remote outpost duty. The Varaxians, feeling somewhat vindicated that they weren't the only ones who had miscalculated, graciously refrained from saying, "We told you so." At least in official communications, unofficially, the Draconian embassy on Verax Prime received a large delivery of what humans would recognize as humble pie. Though the cultural context was lost on most recipients, we need to understand what we're dealing with, announced High Admiral Z. Karan of the Krasic Defense Force during a closed-door session. These Marines represent a tactical paradigm we've never encountered. Perhaps we're overreacting, suggested a junior strategist who was Human diplomatic channels remained suspiciously quiet. No gloating, no threats, no demands for reparations, beyond the return of their research station and personnel. This unnerved the predator species even more than outright aggression would have when you've evolved as an apex predator. You expect other predators to display dominance. After a victory, the humans just went back to their scientific research and trade negotiations as if nothing universe-shattering had occurred. The Galactic Xenobiology Institute, sensing both danger and opportunity, launched the most comprehensive study of human physiology and psychology ever attempted. Their preliminary findings sent shockwaves through academic circles, Humans Explained, distinguished Professor Thrikal. To a packed auditorium are persistent predators with pack hunting instincts who somewhere along their evolutionary path develop problem-solving capabilities that essentially weaponize their intelligence. Holographic displays showed human skeletal and muscular systems, highlighting features that had previously been dismissed as unremarkable. Note the locomotive efficiency. She continued, pointing to the leg structure. Their ancestors literally chased prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. They didn't need to be the fastest, they just needed to keep going when everything else had to stop. A nervous titter ran through the audience. But that alone doesn't explain the Marines, interjected a Draconian researcher. There must be more to it. The professor nodded, changing the display to human historical records. Indeed, what makes Marines particularly effective is the systematic way humans have refined their natural predatory instincts through something they call training. They don't just rely on instinct. They enhance it, channel it, direct it with precision. The display showed human Marines performing exercises that seemed pointlessly repetitive to most predator species, who relied more on innate abilities than learned behaviors. They do the same actions thousands of times until they can perform them without conscious thought, even under extreme stress. They train in groups to develop coordinated hunting. Tactical patterns, and most disturbingly, they deliberately expose themselves to conditions simulating the worst environments they might encounter. The audience collectively shifted in their seats. Ancestral instincts recognizing the implications before conscious mind caught up. "You're saying they voluntarily make things harder for themselves?" asked a Varaxian with visible disbelief. "Precisely their training motto, which translates roughly to the more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed. In war encapsulates this philosophy. They intentionally operate at a disadvantage during training, so that actual combat seems easier. By comparison, the resulting research paper, titled Evolutionary Anomaly, How Humans Weaponized Adaptability and Created Marines, became required reading across military minds throughout the galaxy. Its conclusion was both simple and terrifying. What made Marines exceptional wasn't some genetic quirk or technological advantage. It was a cultural institution designed to amplify humanity's existing predatory traits while compensating for their physical limitations. In other words, Marines weren't born. They were built. This revelation did nothing to comfort the predator species who had spent millennia assuming that physical superiority translated directly to military dominance. If anything, it made the situation worse. You could potentially outmaneuver a natural ability. But how do you counter an adaptive system specifically designed to identify and exploit weaknesses? Diplomatic relations shifted, subtly but significantly. Trade agreements suddenly favored human interests, slightly more than before. Border disputes were resolved with surprising speed, usually in humanity's favor. The few predator species who didn't get the memo and attempted shows of force found themselves facing those same marines with predictably humbling results. A particularly amusing incident occurred during a cultural exchange program on the human colony world of New Anchorage. A Draconian dignitary, several drinks past diplomatic discretion, loudly proclaimed that the marine phenomenon was exaggerated. An elderly human maintenance worker quietly approached and said, "Son, I served as a Marine for 20 years before retiring to this frozen rock. Now I'm old, arthritic, and half-blind, but I reckon I could still take you down before you got those fancy wings fully extended." The dignitary, demonstrating rare wisdom for his species, chose to believe him. Most telling of all was the change in Galactic. Security firms' hiring practices, where once they had exclusively employed members of predator species as guards and enforcers, they now actively recruited human veterans, particularly those who casually mentioned Marine Corps in their employment. History: the pay premium for these individuals reached almost comical levels, with some security companies essentially offering blank checks. As one Kreshik CEO put it during a shareholders meeting, "Yes, the compensation package is expensive, but have you priced out the cost of having your entire security force defeated by a handful of individuals who view our most elite warriors as a moderate workout?" No one argued with that logic. Decades passed. The original incidents faded from news cycles into history books, then from history books into legend. Like all good legends, the tale of the Marines grew. With each retelling, did 43 Marines really defeat 200 Draconian elites, or was 30 Marines against 300? Some versions claimed it was a dozen against 1,000. Irrelevant details. The core truth remained intact when humans said, "We're sending the Marines." Predator species suddenly remembered urgent appointments elsewhere. Neurological studies confirmed what cultural anthropologists had already documented. The predator species had developed an actual measurable physiological response to the word marine. Brain scans showed activity in the primitive fear centers. Pupils dilated, heart rates increased, and fight-or-flight hormones flooded their systems, not just in those who had encountered Marines personally, but in subsequent generations who had only heard the stories and evolutionary adaptations spreading in real time. The humans, being humans, leveraged this phenomenon with a subtlety that continually surprised a galaxy accustomed to more direct power plays. They never bragged about their Marines, never threatened explicitly. They didn't need to. A human diplomat would simply mention casually that we'd hate to involve the Marines in this situation, and suddenly trade deals magically resolved themselves. Human merchant vessels traveled unmolested through sectors where other ships required armed convoys simply by adding seat transport to their identification codes. Even human tourists found themselves receiving preferential treatment on worlds where predator species traditionally viewed all non-predators as second-class citizens at best and snacks at worst. Perhaps the most telling sign of the Marines' legendary status was the emergence of a strange cultural phenomenon. Predator species began collecting human military memorabilia, Marine Corps flags, insignia, and even replicas of their dress uniforms became valuable status symbols. Simultaneously, a good luck charm and a ward against evil. If you respect the Marines, went the popular wisdom. Maybe they won't come for you. The irony wasn't lost on humanity, a species that had spent most of its history being terrified of things with big teeth and claws, had somehow become the monster under the bed for the galaxy's most fearsome predators during the bicentennial celebration of humanity's entry into the galactic community. A reporter asked the commandant of the Marine Corps about this peculiar legacy. The galaxy got it backwards, the commandant replied with a shrug. They thought being a predator made you dangerous. We've always known that. What makes something truly dangerous isn't its ability to kill, it's its willingness to die for something greater than itself. The reporter looked confused. But isn't that a weakness? The common smiled. That's exactly what makes it our greatest strength. The most dangerous creature in the universe isn't the one with the sharpest claws or the deadliest venom. It's the one that looks death in the face and says, "Not today, I've got a job to finish." And that ultimately is why predator species throughout the galaxy still flinch at the word Marines, not because they fear what Marines might do to them, but because they fear what Marines represent, the uncomfortable truth that in the grand evolutionary race, the apex predator isn't the one that kills most. Efficiently, it's the one that turned death itself into just another problem to solve.